All right. It's my pleasure for us to kick off this community conversation this afternoon. And our first agenda item is opening comments by our City of San Diego Chief Operating Officer, Scott Chadwick. So please help me welcome Scott Chadwick.
Thanks, Danelle. Welcome. This thing's really loud, huh? So, well, hopefully everyone here is as excited as I am because we're at a real unique position in the city of San Diego's history. Because what you're all here for is we want your opinion. We want to know what you want to see in your next police chief. And obviously, we have a fantastic police chief right now, Chief Shelley Zimmerman. She's enrolled in DROP, which means that she has a definite retirement date. So effective, I believe it's March 1st of 2018, she will be retiring from the city of San Diego. But you know, when a door closes, another one opens. So that gives us the opportunity to be able to select our next police chief. But obviously, we can't do that without all of your help. So the intent behind the forum that you've got today is we want to find out what you want from your police chief. We want to know about the characteristics. We want to know about the qualities. We want to hear from you. So we've got, I think, a very exciting agenda today, and it's going to be led by our facilitator for this, someone who's got a tremendous amount of experience in organizational effectiveness, in the Citizens Review Board on Police Practices, and the Human Relations Commission, and that's unfortunately Danelle recently retired, but we were smart enough to bring her back so that she can lead the efforts in this. So again, let me welcome Danelle back up, and she's going to go ahead and lead this. And again, what we want is we want the best candidate for the city of San Diego. You're going to tell us that. So please discuss if they're like. I can't emphasize enough how much involvement we want to hear from you. Some of the things, obviously this is the first of 6 that we're going to be holding, but we're also going to be doing is Facebook Living this. We are videotaping this so that we'll be able to share it with others that want to see so that they can hear the discussion. But then also if you go to the City of San Diego's website, which is sandiego.gov, we have a web page that's dedicated to the police chief recruitment as well as a survey. So I would encourage you to encourage your community members as well as friends to go to the website and participate in the survey. We will be then compiling all that information, and that'll be a report that we'll be then turning over to both City Council as well as making available to the community. So with that said, let me welcome back up Danelle Scarborough. Danelle?
Good, thank you. All right, thank you for choosing this over a beautiful Saturday afternoon. This is a tough time to come in doors, but a really important conversation. So thank you for being here. I'm going to start off and walk through the format that we have for this afternoon. You'll see it's heavily emphasizing your conversations and then us having time to hear report outs from those conversations. I have these boards up here, but you are much more readily likely to be able to read the agenda that you have in front of you. Each of you have all 3 of these boards on sheets of paper in front of you. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the format. Our design today is meant to stimulate conversations at the tables. We have a couple questions that we want you to focus on. And then after a few minutes of you being able to have those table conversations, we'd like a report out so that the whole group can hear what your table talked about. One of the challenges when you ask community for input, you can get a whole laundry list of items. And by having you talk at the table first and think about what answers you have in common, and begin to think about a priority order. When you report out, what we hear is some thinking through and some analysis and some choice making on your part. So that's why this format, community conversations first and then report out so that everybody in the room can hear what the different tables have talked about. So We're going to do question 1, question 2. We're thinking that that's the amount of time that we have. Our session goes to 3 o'clock today. We do have a third question on your participant input form. If there's something that's important for you to add to that question, then please, we'd like you to write it down, and we will have city staff as well as a box as you leave, so we can take those input forms from you on your way out. At the end, we'll reiterate what the next step is with the data that you've shared today. We'll talk about how if you feel like there were things that you didn't have an opportunity to say, we'll give you some choices about how you can continue to interact with this process. And then we'll close at 3 o'clock and hope the sun is still shining so you can have a little bit of Saturday left. On the back side of your agenda, we have some guidelines that these will sound very familiar. The National Conflict Resolution Center, NCRC, has been using this code of civil discourse for quite a while in facilitating community conversations, and we're going to use their guidelines for our conversation this afternoon. They include having an inclusive environment where we want to hear diverse perspectives. They're shared and they're considered. Listen attentively, primarily at the tables, and then secondarily as we report out to the large community here. Ask questions so that you can understand each other. We'll show respect for ideas and views even when we disagree. And we probably will disagree on some things. I think that's inherent in a community dialogue. The key in that phrase is the respect for ideas and views. We'll explain our positions fairly, presenting the reasons for them, and avoid personal attacks or any other tactics that might distract from our questions of what do we want in our next police chief? What should our next police chief focus on as a priority issues and concerns? So those will be the key questions that we ask today. And then I will focus your attention on that second sheet of paper. It says community input at the top of the page. The key questions we'll start with, what are the top priorities our next chief must address? That'll be our first question. Our second question will be, what do you think are the top characteristics or qualities or traits that are required for our next police chief? And then, as I mentioned, that third question, if you have other ideas that you'd like to share on, is there anything else that the City of San Diego should consider when selecting the next police chief? On the form is the important place to put it. All right? Good. So the way that the conversations are going to go, you'll see on your agenda a little bit more detail. We're going to ask you if you'd like to spend a minute organizing your thinking and answering the question. Take a little bit of time for individual notes when you consider that first question. And then if you would have a table discussion. And one of the important things in a table discussion is everybody takes a turn and goes around and shares their opinion. And sometimes to do that most effectively, it helps to designate kind of a leader or a facilitator who takes the responsibility to make sure all voices at the table are heard. So it would encourage you to nominate or voluntold somebody to serve that role for you at your table. And then after about 10, 15 minutes of table conversations, we're going to ask that each table share with us what emerged from your conversation. We'll do that by writing on charts, and then we'll put the charts on the wall, and then we'll ask somebody from each spokesperson from each table to share with the larger group the top 3 items, top 3 priorities about next issue, top 3 priorities about characteristics, so that we can make sure every table gets heard. So, table conversation, pick a top 3 that you want to write on a chart so we can get up on the wall. And then in about 15 minutes, I'll come back on the microphone and we'll begin to go table by table and hear about your conversations. Yes? Why don't you move into a table and then make sure.
No, that's not what I said. I said, would you ask if
Yes.
anyone is
Are there,
advocating?
is there anybody?
Is anyone advocating for the mentally ill that I could join that group?
Advocating for the mentally ill?
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Good. Thank you. Good, good. Okay. Community conversation. Ready, set, go. We're going to ask each group, we've shifted and we're going to use this wall right here. Each table will send their spokesperson up with their chart. We're just going to focus on question 1 right now, just the top 3 priorities for question 1. And we can take a table who's ready to go first. Anybody, any table willing to volunteer as a number 1? All right, come on up. Why don't you start right here? And you want to work with, thank you, Nick.
Tell us a little bit about what you identified.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name's Jerry. Our table focused, we got about 1 topic each, and so we're just to try and focus on the different things we care about. The first thing is more and regular community meetings, so not just a weekly meeting, but perhaps, or not just a monthly meeting, but perhaps more consistent meetings throughout the communities, especially in this area, for instance, where the cops are coming out at least twice a month to actually talk to the community and have a closer finger on the pulse of the neighborhood. The second thing is looking at how our new chief will handle how we address mentally ill suspects and inmate or suspects and just through the whole process. So arresting or first contact, arresting, what institutions they take the suspect to, and also the entire focus of how they're focusing on the mentally ill. The third thing is over-policing communities of color, because we believe that there's a much higher concentration of police patrolling and enforcement in people of color, in communities of people of color, than there are areas that are perhaps same amount of people, but just a bias towards certain people. We need a chief that's culturally competent and proficient. So addressing the biases that are already in the community and are already in with the police department, either naturally or institutionally. The next one is the networking and engaging community resources for the homeless. So being able to work with all stakeholders, from the homeless to the providers to the institutions that are helping with different services, and just how we look at our homeless in general. Is we think that San Diego needs to take another look at that, because instead of criminalizing people for being poor and needy. And lastly, we need more and timely open data available by machine readable content. So I believe everything we're talking about in this room is most likely can be tracked by outcomes, and so we need the data. We need it on a website. We need it machine readable so that anybody can get data from stops or calls for service stops, crimes, arrests, officer involved, negative things like shootings or any kind of conflict complaints. All these things are data that the community should have so that we can make more informed contributions to the department. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Good first start. Table number 2 is ready.
Excellent.
Hi, my name is Donna Alexander, and I'm loud, and I really don't need this, but anyways. So at our table, we think that recruitment and retention is an issue. We need someone for the next chief who's familiar, who has lived in the community of San Diego. We don't believe that a national search is the answer, because we need somebody that's homegrown from San Diego. Recruiting officers who reflect the communities that they serve. And in that, also to have advocates in each community, people who are advocates for the community that actually will represent their communities as advocates. San Diego is a very diverse place with a lot of populations. We feel the same. We need someone, the next chief needs to understand about that mental illness has no color. Someone who knows community policing. We need to get back to the old days. I used to live in Baltimore, Maryland, and one of the things I used to like is that police officers got out and they walked the beat and you knew them. Officer so-and-so would come and he knew your name, you knew his name. He didn't just roll through your neighborhood with his Oakleys on, checking side to side. He spoke to you. He said, "Good morning, Miss Alexander. How are you today? Good afternoon, good evening." You know what? This is about humanness. It's about relationship. And the next person who's going to be the chief of police for the city of San Diego, the diverse city of San Diego. And they need to make sure they promote from within.
Thank you.
Please, come on up.
Let me put that up for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning. I'm Andre Branch, the president of the NAACP here in San Diego. We had a number of concerns, and we've brought 3 of the top priorities. Number 1, we believe the next police chief needs to address department issues with respect to staffing, recruiting, retention, and training. There are not nearly enough officers to address community concerns across the city. And number 2, address community concerns about racial profiling. All of us in the room know that that is an issue. Other folks have mentioned it as well. There needs to be a head-on addressing of issues of racial profiling across our city. And 3, increase diversity at all levels, but emphasize racial diversity in police management. And by that, we mean there needs to be more people of color at the supervisor level, sergeant, the manager level, lieutenants and captains, and at the executive level, assistant chiefs. There is one item that didn't make it onto the paper because I was interested in getting up here. But the 4th item that we think is a priority is to address domestic violence that happens across our city.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'll put it up here. There you go. You want to? You're comfortable holding the microphone?
I think so. Probably don't need one. My name's Arturo, and I'm with the HSSA HIV Planning Group, and I'm at table back there. Our first answer to our question, or our question would be to the next chief how would they engage our community and listen to the feedback, and what is their plan for the engagement with the pastors of each community, because pastors or center, the center's leaderships, how they branch out to the people and then to the children from there. How would they approach that and start doing that? Also, the second one would be, how would they set training policies and diversities and ethnic and all the forced homelessness, immigration, and searches, stop and searches. I wrote something here. How would their policies be clarified? As what I wrote. How would they do that? Because we live in, like everyone said, a cultural city. I think they need more training in cultural communication. Shaking the hand to everybody with your right hand is not everybody's forte in a lot of cultures, if you know what they use their hand for. Number 3, how would they process recruitment and the overseas communities? I wrote here, let's see, what would be their effectiveness in training?
Yeah, this one looks like, how would they propose ensuring recruitment from diverse communities?
Thank you,
Yep,
ensuring.
got it.
Thank you. So also, I'm not sure where this would fit in. I was just throwing this out there. Could the fire department be a police chief?
They are welcome to apply.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very good. Next one. All right, we're doing well. Come on, let's keep moving, keep moving. Good report outs here.
You comfortable with the mic?
Of course I am. So at our table, we have a summary of issues that we felt were vital to understand. Obviously, this has been reiterated, community policing, but we also want to emphasize on how do we define community policing. There's various definitions, such as going out and walking a beat. It can even go as far as civic engagement with the community, police officers actually interacting with the community and doing some form of outreach. And fostering that ties into our next point, which is school restorative justice programs and the Citizens Review Board, and having them collaborate actively with the police department. Because what I really want to emphasize about the school restorative justice programs is that this already leads to some form of self-determination among our youth, and they have this knowledge. So community policing involves community knowledge, and that's one way we can emphasize on this collaboration and turn the school to prison pipeline to school to citizens review collaboration pipeline. So that ties into our next point, racial profiling, and it kind of goes hand in hand with some of the traits that we want our next police chief to possess. As you know, there's a study done by San Diego State and ACLU about the racial profiling statistics that have occurred throughout San Diego. And the thing about that is, I'm just speaking from stories, anecdotal experience. When I interact with people who come from outside of San Diego, they don't know about the cultural communities that we continue to speak of. I've had one person tell me, where's Black San Diego at? Where is Latino San Diego? And usually it's because they never went anywhere south of the 8 freeway. So adding on to that, I would tie in this other term, cultural humility. It does not mean you're necessarily bound before a culture. You're just going out of your way to understand that you don't know how different cultures communicate, so you're willing to learn, being open. Our next point is transparency, and this ties into just communication and language altogether. So we have 2 components of this, technology and infrastructure. That can be both built or social. And what we mean by that is a topic that came up at our table was defining what is excessive force and when is it used. So in order for us to actually understand that, how that's communicated to us and how we perceive when a crime occurs or how our community should go about approaching it, that is one thing we need to emphasize. And also the technology piece, we've heard the discussions about the cameras and things of that nature, but this kind of goes into what other groups discussed about open data. And that's what it is. Knowledge is power. Thank you very much for having this here. So.
Are you comfortable holding the mic?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So for our group, what our top 3 priorities were, there was a whole list, but the first one is restorative justice and practices, and the reason behind that is we live in a punitive system right now, and that system is set up to exclude people and not bring them into community. So what we want to do is be able to do restorative justice in a way where we hold each other accountable and we make sure that we bring as one community rather than excluding those and putting them in prison. Another one is open to reform and actually start reforming some of the policies that are already in place. For example, our table is mostly youth, and what we feel like is that when there's curfew sweeps, truant sweeps only being implemented in communities of color, why is that happening? It shouldn't be happening. What we should be doing is making sure that we find out what is going on and how do we prevent those kind of situations. Another one is building community trust. We feel like that should be a priority because everything that's going on, not only locally, but even federally and across the nation, you need to build trust in the community in order to be able to build relationship and actually hold people accountable. And it doesn't mean putting them in prison system. It doesn't mean locking them up and sending them away from their own families, but that actually builds in how can we keep you and how can we create a better community across San Diego. So those are our top 3 priorities. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Come on over.
Are you comfortable with the mic?
Yeah, I'm good. Good afternoon. There are some great tables in here, but I'm from the best table right here. And we had a great discussion, and it seemed like most of the tables are coming with the same things. I don't know if we need to hire more policemen, but we need a chief who's going to bring protection and service to all communities for when there's a need, and not profile our Black and Latinos and Asian kids. We talked about transparency being one of the issues, and diversity when it comes to hiring and promoting. And then we talked about equality and ongoing community engagement, variety of meeting year-round, like quarterly, coming into all of the communities and let them know what the crime rate and what happened here and how to avoid that, and get to know the officers in your community, like walking a beat, like the rest of the table said.
Hold on question 2. You had a high-performing table, obviously, and you already did 1, 2, and 3, but we're just going to focus. We'll call you back up for question number 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Were you finished with your responses to 1?
Yeah.
I just feel like I was
We're going to call you back up for question number 2.
I am. Very good.
The first thing I want to say is I was stunned. I didn't know most of the members at my table, but we were in complete agreement on what the 3 top priorities were, and we came to that decision independently. We first wrote it down, and then we talked about it. So it was amazing how in sync we were. The first thing was accountability for police actions, and other people have spoken about that. Also, the next one, number 2, is the creation of trust between the police department and the community. And there were several things that we thought went into creating trust between the police department and the community. One is accessibility. For example, putting their policies and practices online. And that is in keeping with transparency. We really felt that transparency was important, making sure that information and data is online. And I would also add transparency in the search police. The process for finding a new police chief is extremely important. That would mean not having a secret panel not having a secret search panel to find this police chief. Keeping that panel secret does not create trust. And there is no reason to have a secret search committee. So if that search committee is open and transparent, that is going to allow us to trust whoever the new police chief is. So that's a really big issue. Community outreach is important. Community policing that's already been discussed is really important. And of course, a willingness to change policy and culture. If that police chief doesn't come in with an open heart and a willingness to change the culture and policies, then there's really nowhere to go. Then we also thought that addressing needs of marginalized communities was really important. And then finally, our third major plank was recruitment of officers with good moral character. There you go.
Thank you very much. Put that up for you. There you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Christy Figueroa, and I'm with the San Diego Organizing Project. Woo woo, can I hear woo woo on my table over there? Great job, you guys. Everything looks really good up there, and as you can see, we all have a lot of the same things, right? So we're gonna go through it anyway. Racial profiling. One of the big things is about the written consent prior to searches. I think we all agree that that's not okay. You can't just come up here and search our kids, search our families. No, that's not okay. Until I say so, and I actually write it on there. Not after I get to jail. Don't give it to me then, please. I think we need to reprogram our thinking. We already know, they already know who, what, where, and when. Because they know exactly who I'm going to profile, right? I'm going to stop a Latino today. I'm going to stop a black person today, right? I know where, because I'm going to go there. I know where I'm going to find them at. Okay, what am I going to do? And then when, because I'm going to go at nighttime, or I'm going to go at this hour, correct? So you already know that. So reprogramming, think about that. And then train them to think differently. Also, department morale. How many in here believe that your department, if your office runs well, you run well, right? We're all happy, right? So if our department of police is happy, and everybody in the office is getting equal resource, is getting hiring diversity. If you go in there and you see a whole bunch of people that look the same, look like us, from our own community, it's gonna make a difference, right? If I go in there and I know my aunt's in there because she hot, it makes a difference. I don't think we should be hiring everybody from over there and over there. Bring them home. That's how we know are familiar with those officers, correct? Resource funding. We need resource funding, and we don't need it just one time. Just like we don't want diversity. We don't want people to be hired of color one time. We want them to have all positions and ongoing. Put that as your regular procedure, right? And then same thing with the resource funding. We want it to be just like we asked the city to put money in their budget for us. We want that in your regular budget. Okay, we don't want it to be something that you want to do one time. We got something for you guys this week. What about next year? What about the following year? Okay. Opportunity for advancement, we spoke about that. Full implementation of restorative justice. How many are you familiar with restorative justice? Absolutely. So, juvenile hall is not an option. We need to come up with some alternatives. We need resources. We need healing in our communities. Restorative justice means looking at alternative ways to solve the problems so that we're all happy and it's a win-win. Mental illness. I can't say no more. We need to be properly trained for mental illness. They can't come out and treat someone who has mental illness, whether they look like it or not. The actions will show, and they need to be prepared. Don't pull out your guns on them. It's going to change the situation immediately. Never ends good. And then homeless. I've never seen so many homeless. I've been here all my life, never seen so many homeless as now. And so, San Diego, where are we? Let's get together and let's get it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello. I'll take that. There you go.
Okay, now, if I knew she was going to do all that, I would have stepped back a couple to make sure. I don't want to follow that. But good evening, or good afternoon. So what our table had come up with really is the same thing that everybody else, for the most part, has come up with, which is good. That means that we're all like-minded. We all want to see something progressive and positive happen for our communities. But what we were looking at in particular was the homeless situation, like everyone was talking about, but in particular, the criminalization of the homeless. We know that homeless people have varying backgrounds. It could be drug addicted, they could be, mentally disordered. There's a lot of different types of homeless. But the one thing that we do know is that if you have a policy, and from my understanding, the police department's policy for the homeless is to ticket enough times to be able to remove that person from the community. There's no way for them to pay for the tickets and for the fines and things that they receive. So we need a police chief to come in that can kind of revise that policy and come up with something that's going to benefit everyone. And then second, we came up with addressing bias policing, including the racial profiling situation. I would say us being south of the 8, we're familiar with that, but really anywhere in the city of San Diego, you are familiar with racial profiling, no matter how positively you think, about how, well, it only happens to certain people or they must be doing something in order to have that happen to them. We all know that that is not the case. Everybody has bias, and we need a police chief that can address that in their hiring and in their practices, for their recruits. Also, we were talking about the retention and the recruitment of diverse, qualified police officers, not only from the race and the gender piece, but we were also talking about these police officers are babies. They are young. And a lot of these police officers, when I was talking to our local police sergeant, was saying that his main challenge was that he's sending them out into the community to deal with situations that not only have they not encountered, in life, but that, you're coming from living with mom and dad and coming to a situation where we're fussing and we're throwing stuff, and I got grandkids older than you. So we need to look in our recruitment of police officers, not only getting the young recruits, but trying to recruit older, more seasoned police officers that can, relate and identify with our people. And our table was so good with that. And then last but not least, we had effective community policing, not community stalking, because we are very familiar with the stalking of the community, where you're coming in and you're like, hey, has anybody seen this person? I know y'all seen this person. We need people that can identify, that can see themselves in us and in our communities and reach us on that level. And we need a police chief that will be able to identify not only those people, but if you have the people that are already hired, that can implement that in the people that they already have and have consequences, frankly, for the people that can't get it. So that's it. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job. You're natural. Good afternoon. There you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Bevel. I'm with Project Save Our Children. And Project Save Our Children address a disproportionate number of African-American children in the foster care system. And I say this often, blacks are only 4.5% of a 3.5 million population in San Diego. It's only 160,000 blacks in San Diego. But we are disproportionately represented when it comes to racial profiling. I think you see a common theme with that. Racial profiling was written about in Ebony magazine in the late 90s. So you have like three police chiefs, maybe 4 since then. So there's a culture in the police department that supports racial profiling. So we're looking for a police chief that's willing to swim up against that blue code of silence. We want to see greater action and partnership with the community, and we want the police chief to understand the community in its context and its culture. Every community is different. Every community is expected to, of course, to obey the law. But there are some perceptions about black community in particular that when a police officer goes out, they're preconceived. It is guilty until proven innocent. So that's a perception that we want the police officers to be willing to go against. And then the transparency in the hiring process. Hiring is one thing, retention is another. So even though someone can get hired, how well is the San Diego Police Department willing doing rather in retaining black police officers or police officers of color. Because some of my friends who were past police officers, they were bullied by the police department. They were bullied by their fellow workers. So that code of silence, that blue code of silence really has to be addressed, and it really should be destroyed. Fair is fair. There are about, we guesstimate about 127 or so complaints from the community, but we don't hear about them. We don't know how they were resolved. We don't even know if they were resolved, if they were addressed. So what we're asking for is transparency as it relates to police misconduct. Are there more complaints coming out of the community south of 8th or less? Because south of 8th does not have the highest crime rate in the city. Everyone knows that, right? I guess everyone knows that, right? We don't. But we're over police, but we don't. It's like the war on drugs. Well, that's a different subject. I won't go there. And then we want training that's commiserated with the community realities and concerns of the citizen. If you get in a situation where the citizens are complaining about frequent stop, train the officers about that. Look at the reason why they're stopping. But the main thing that we really want is a change for the better, where all citizens are treated equally and fairly.
Well put. Thank you. There you go. I'll put that up for you.
Sure. Hello, my name is Viet Mai. I am local to San Diego, born and raised, a member of the community at large. Our table came up with a lot of the same themes that were reoccurring throughout this whole entire activity. We acknowledge profiling as a top priority to address. We didn't want to just say racial profiling, although that is a huge part of profiling, but also the profiling of poor people, of homeless people, of the mentally ill, with many other forms of profiling. So we wanted to make it, let's look at things a little more holistically. Also address the use of excessive force, and training on more advanced training on de-escalation, but even more so than de-escalation, not even even how the matters are approached. I know a lot of times when I get pulled over, automatically I'm just being screamed at, and it's a culture. It's a culture of oppression that we also need to move from going from an oppressive culture to a more collective, compassionate, empathetic culture, which is about community policing, community and youth engagement as well. A lot of positive interactions with youth rather than more negative interactions with youth. Also, police accountability and transparency. I think this community forum is definitely a step in the right direction, and we also would like to see some more follow through as issues continue to be addressed. Thank you.
As people have said, there are themes emerging here, so thank you for having that validated and documented here. You did a really good job of communicating at your team and then putting the issues up on the table. We're going to ask you to do that for the second question. This question focuses on the leadership qualities that are needed in the next police chief. Specifically, what are the top characteristics, qualities that our next police chief must possess? We're going to do the same thing and ask you to discuss. Table number 1, you're already done, and you'll be the first report out when we start. Oh, you're ready, okay. So, but take about 10 minutes and talk about question number 2, key qualities, characteristics, traits that we need in the next police chief. So we've already determined who's going to be the first presenter on question number 2. Can you come on up and start off with question number 2? What characteristics and qualities should our next police chief have?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Lionel Smith again from Family Resource and Support Network and community member from the best table here at this. So what we're looking for in a chief is a woman of color who's culturally competent and high ethical and transparent to all of the communities, honesty and responsive to the community needs, protecting and service, quarterly reports on what happened in the community, and a good collaborator with diversity organizations such as San Diego Organizing Project and other ones that is in and around this room. So that's basically what we're looking for police chief. She had to be a woman of color because our Latino boys and black boys are being brutalized, and our mother knows how to treat their sons better than anybody. So I think it should be a female of color.
Okay, before you leave, just because you have such a high-performing table, why don't you share with us question 3? Nobody else will get to do that, but share with us your answers to the final question about what else should the city know.
The best table think that we should get somebody local to be the chief, and the ability to work with, understand, and communicate with the police union, and pick someone who lives in San Diego, encourage officer to live in the community and visit the schools and learn who Jose and Little Ray Ray is before that become a problem.
Hi there. Our first one is that we hire our new police chief has a proven, demonstrated trajectory of apolitical public safety leadership, so that they're building the police department with the community versus with the political forces that are there. And just a sidebar, a lot of the things we're talking about need funding, and it really takes us to get to the council members to insist on that funding rather than just crossing our fingers and hoping it comes. We are the people, they serve us. We need to be at the city council public safety meetings in order to get the funding for all the things we want. Sorry for the preaching there. So the second thing is a new police chief with leadership skills and experiences working with historically targeted and marginalized communities with cultural humility. So we adopted the phrase that another speaker brought up of just having somebody who's really sensitive to not just racial, but also sex and other proclivities or other tendencies. So just somebody who's culturally sensitive. And the last is proving experience building communications networks between stakeholders. So police chief that comes in and not just revives the community outreach program, but actually helps build a communication network where the police are in constant communication with the community and actually responding. And the last is there's one more, is using alternative detainment technology. So rather than tasers or guns or rubber bullets, Los Angeles is using nets. So they shoot a net at the person rather than having to shoot them dead. There's other ways to stop people that don't involve killing or maiming them, and we'd like to, if we're going to go after people, we should try different techniques that don't harm them.
Thank you. Good job.
We were reminded that in San Diego we have a strong mayor form of government. The police chief answers to the mayor. We need to remember that. And in light of that, the next police chief needs to be an exceptional collaborator, exceptional in negotiating between the mayor, the community, and the employees. We think the next police chief ought to be independent, but recognize that that independence is compromised by the strong mayor form of government. There needs to be a person who can balance this ability to collaborate between these three entities for the greater good. The individual needs to be a broad thinker, not just narrowly focused on law and order. We have one of those people already in the White House. And here in San Diego, we need a broader thinker who will focus on things broader than simply law and order. The individual needs to be progressive in thinking and holistic in implementing policy. Experienced and knowledgeable in a broad area of human affairs. That is, this individual needs to have a background, a demonstrable background in dealing with people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. That diversity needs to be in terms of race and gender and socioeconomic status. The individual should have a background in dealing with many different communities. Honesty and integrity and empathy should be demonstrated as well. Honesty, integrity, and empathy. All of these qualities should be demonstrated before that individual is hired here.
Very thoughtful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Tuama. I was notified by Alliance San Diego to come to this meeting, and I'm sharing the table with an awesome group of youth with Mid-City Can. I'm a refugee. I came here 7 years ago, and you might know refugees, they don't speak all the language and don't know the culture. And we are already afraid of authority by default. So our experience is different. We don't really know the law. We've never been taught about the US law. So our experience is way, way scary. So we were looking at the characteristics, and city staff are here taking notes. So we thought of doing it as a job description for the second point, because this is an easier way for the person who will collect the notes. So what we wanted to have is an experience with diverse community. So anyone who's going to apply or anyone who's going to say that I'm going to be the police need to prove that he had an experience with diverse community with references. Yeah. And as Donna said, we want someone who's local, hopefully. Proven record of responding to community needs, and proven record of accountability and transparency from previous jobs. I believe this is fair. It's easy. Coming from an employment background, that is something that should be included, and in this simple words. And thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, our table, we had a lot. Integrity, number one. Moral character, passion for the job that they're doing and for the communities that they're going to serve, be respectful to those communities that they're going to serve. The understanding of restorative justice, be transparent, be a chief of action. You know what? We all know actions speak louder than words. Treat every citizen with dignity and respect. Be a people person. Be inclusive. A chief who visits the community, doesn't just sit in his or her office downtown looking out the window at the bay, but that you're out here in the community where the people that you serve live. Be a politician, a community advocate, and basically you have to be able to do it all. I think somebody said it right here. The mayor, the community, and the employees, be a collaborator. I'm a social worker by profession, so all of these things, collaboration, community, bargaining, broker, all of that. A police chief has to be able to do all that. And then that they be community focused, so that goes to the community policing, and that they have an open door policy, a real open door policy, a real one.
Thank you. Good job.
I like that there are, again, a lot of reoccurring themes, and I would like to re-echo some of these themes. So, knowledge and awareness of community concerns. Definitely somebody who is in tune with different communities throughout San Diego. Respect and good listening skills. We also prefer somebody who is homegrown from San Diego, someone who has grown up, knows the climate, the culture, the history, the diversity, the economy, living conditions. We also want to re-echo and emphasize interdisciplinary background. Very, very important. I strongly believe this person needs to have multiple knowledge, experience, and skills in something other than law enforcement, military, any form of basically police culture. Whether the person be in, has a background in social work or engineering even, or even the sciences, honestly, somebody with a different perspective always brings something more compassionate to the table. We did say compassionate and empathetic. This goes with cultural competency, being able to connect with citizens of San Diego, no matter what background they come from. Being able to engage them in an empathetic manner without dehumanizing or demoralizing them. The use of technology to improve human interaction and not to dehumanize. The example about safer apprehension techniques rather than very violent techniques. Also the use of social media to engage the community more, not just to disconnect from the general public. I definitely, so the example about this accountability structure, I personally want to see a police chief that will stand up to a mayor who makes a call out to say remove all the tents in downtown San Diego right before a really big storm. That is not what we want our police force to do when asked by the mayor. We want them to say that is not humane, and we can come up with a better solution. Thank you.
I thought you were going to freestyle, Eric.
Hello, everyone. I'm reporting for our group again, and one particular point we really wanted to emphasize on was trauma-informed care. The reason why we want to emphasize on that is we do have some trauma-informed care initiatives, meaning we educate each other, particularly in our schools. I think Cherokee Point out in City Heights, they have a trauma-informed care program where youth and the families are informed about domestic violence or what triggers domestic violence or these personal experiences. And the reason why we emphasize this is that it's it's not enough just for us as citizens to know. Our police force needs to be instructed on trauma-informed care, because as someone else mentioned up earlier, I think it was some brilliant woman earlier mentioned that a lot of our police officers are young and they come from nuclear families, and what some would define as functional, I don't like using the term dysfunctional because we figure out a way through our dysfunction to make our families function. But the key point we want to emphasize is making sure that our police force is informed and has that education so that when they approach these neighborhoods where it may not look like the neighborhood they grew up in, they know how to, de-escalate and ask someone, how are they first? It sounds simple, but there's complexity and simplicity. So the next bullet point we want to emphasize is a servant leader. They work for us. So this was expressed earlier as far as having a police chief that has an interdisciplinary background, not just disciplinary. And the reason why we're also focusing on that is I would like to know if our police chief has sat on an arts commission at one time, or public health initiative, or some kind of committee. It doesn't always have to be, the so-called, drill and kill, focusing and honing in on just law and order, as someone mentioned earlier. Also, they go beyond their credentials and experience. Someone at our table mentioned, going beyond a minor 6-week certification course or something of that nature, because you can always go back and take like a course and then say, I'm relevant right now, but we need to go beyond that. Collaborative spirit. Again, this is fostering the point of the interdisciplinary approach. So I currently go to school for city planning, and I didn't think much about how environmental psychology plays in the role of things. And there's a method called crime prevention through environmental design. So this means, it kind of goes hand in hand with community policing, but having all eyes on the streets, windows in the alley, the way we have our porches set up in a way where we can communicate just well as a community. So even having a police officer that has some understanding of environmental psychology, and how you handle people in those environments would be a good thing. Not interested in being just a border patrol agent. I heard a story right here at our table that it really bothered me that sometimes police forces collaborate with ICE to pull people out of their beds in the middle of the night, or when they're dropping off their children at school. That is a scary thought to me, and it's not a fair process. So being that we're a binational city, we need to focus on that. Straight up character trait, integrity, just not being afraid to go beyond the bubble, the law bubble. And a legacy of community collaboration, community service, and restorative justice. Again, there's nothing wrong with having a diverse resume of different talents and trades. It's not soft. That's the perception, I think, that comes with expressing these desires and ambitions for the police, is that it might be considered soft, but it's not. It actually empowers how we do our relations with our community. And also bilingual. Again, add on to the point that we're a binational city and we have city heights, right in the heart of San Diego. It does not hurt to be able to communicate, because language itself affects perception, and we really need to focus on that. So, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Pfister. I'm representing the table in the middle in the back there. So what we came up with for characteristics that are important in a new police chief are being open-minded, especially to community criticism, willingness to hold police accountable, both in an internal sense and external. So being willing to conduct their own internal investigations and hold police accountable, but also being willing to accept suggestions from, say, a civilian review board externally. And then being compassionate yet strong, and the ability to work with diverse groups and communities. It's a common theme. And then finally, we thought it would be good for them to have a community service background, sort of that mindset and orientation. So, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Sure. I'm gonna grab some tape and I'll be right back.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Alara Chilton, and I'm president of the San Diego La Raza Lawyers Association. We are the only Latino bar in San Diego, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you. As you can imagine, I represent a community of color, so we are very much stakeholders in this process. And I sit over here at the table. I also have Christy Hill and others from the ACLU, and hello over there. I'd like to share with you just what we thought of at our table right now, and that is, we thought one of the characteristics that a police chief should have is transparency and inclusiveness. We do not need a leader who is going to be someone who's going to make decisions exclusively based on his own military regime, but rather someone who's going to work with the lower rank and file and bring in everyone else that's relevant in that decision-making process. Well, in that regard, we also want someone who's open to suggestions as the common theme, someone who's open-minded, open to criticism and suggestions. Also, cultural awareness, cultural training. As everyone knows, San Diego is a very diverse population. Also, we wanted someone who could look at 21st century policing report. That was a commission that was done in 2015, a study that was under the leadership of President Obama, looking at best practices for policing in the community. And that was done with the purpose of fostering trust within the community and within the police force. So someone who could look at that report and implement those practices would be ideal. Again, a common theme of willingness to be part and engaged in the community, someone who's going to walk in and be a part of it, not just stalk it, not just harass it. Also, we live in an age where we're still looking at stereotypes. We're still doing racial profiling. What we should be doing is evidence-based practices, evidence-based policing, looking at the data, looking at the evidence. What works when it comes to deterring crime? What works when it comes to getting children out of the criminal justice system? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Darwin Fishman, and I'm with the Peace Resource Center, and I'm on the Community Review Board on Police Practices. And our group, we really kept it short and simple. We put it in one sentence: police chief should have the intelligence, integrity, courage, and experience to effect fundamental change in police culture and policy. And part of what we put emphasis on was experience outside of law enforcement. And then we highlighted a lot of the similar themes that have been brought up, especially in terms of the intelligence, integrity, and courage, especially for changing policy and culture for the, law enforcement here in San Diego, and fitting with what others have said, so that it's not, there's a connection between things like the rhetoric, what we discussed, and then what's actually the changes that are made to help improve law enforcement here. And then with that, what has been what's shared with that, they can have experience outside of law enforcement too. That would be helpful. And it doesn't just have to be a career law enforcement person that we give priority to in the search. I think those were the key points that we hit on for our group. Thank you.
You all set?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Paul White, and I go to San Diego High.
Hi everyone, my name is Gracie Uriarte and I'm an organizer at the ACLU.
Come on, you're the future.
Right.
So the first characteristic that we thought our new chief should have is the ability to bring about a culture change in the PD to allow for, fair, and equal treatment of all citizens. They also have to be trustworthy, will do the right thing when the wrong thing is expected. Committed to serve and protect everyone, every citizen, regardless of the socioeconomic status, etc. Transparency with respect to claims of misconduct and passion. And have compassion. And understanding of racial bias in the force integrity, being able to admit when wrong.
We were also hoping that this person will have a commitment to development of an inclusive vision for the department, including having honesty, fairness, and ethical decision-making, willingness to redirect funds toward prevention and investing in the youth.
And understand and recognize white privilege.
Nicely done. Thank you.
Is it okay if I put you here front and center?
You can put it wherever you like. You guys are our future, so thank you. I can go home now, right? It's all dead. It was like a challenge to get started. Like, what do we really, really want? You know, we can't just throw words up there. So what does that mean? So our first one is trust. Transparency equals trust. It's very simple. It's not hard. You're not hiding anything, and we're not going to accuse you of anything. Community-centered. Different communities need different needs, have different needs, right? So we're not expecting them to, or him or her to only be centered in one, but to understand that when you go to La Mesa, when you go wherever in San Diego, that you're understanding each community is different, and you have to be ready to provide those needs. Shared community morals and values. And now each community may also have different morals and values. Again, you need to share those communities' morals and values. A person of integrity. No implicit nor explicit biases. So you need to be non-biased. Don't come up with stuff already before you get there or before you hear about it. Communities, I don't have no glasses on, you guys, I'm getting a little blinder. Communities know best. I don't know about you guys, but I know what goes on in my community. And so, listen. Listen is very, very important. When people tell their stories, it's coming from your hearts. It's coming from your soul. You don't have to make it up. It's real, right? So you need to listen and pay attention. Take notes. Not afraid to push against the grain. You're going to go from your peers up to the mayor. You got to be afraid not to get in there and let them say no. Yes, I'm not going to do something because it's wrong. We need a chief of police that's going to stand up for us, that's going to speak up for us, not just say okay. But I need you to get in there and say why and change this. You know, and ask the community to support them. We're not asking the chief of police just to support us. We're asking them to allow us to support them too. Not community history. We want to know about, you guys should know about their history in their own communities, whether it's here in San Diego or whether it's in another state. You need to know, what was their involvement? What type of service did they do? What was their reputation? Did they even, were they an officer over there, or did they work in schools? What did they do for the people? Or were they just quiet and you never saw them? Committed to and supporting Obama's 21st Century Policing Report and the tenets included. Me too, but okay, I gotta say that too. Okay, that gets me excited. That's the neutrability, fairness, trust, and impartialism. We need to have an open door policy. If SDOP calls and says, hey, Chief, we have an issue going on, we know best. We know our communities. We need you to say, hey, Christina, we'll meet with you on Tuesday or whatever. You guys come on in. Don't push me aside and close the door. I'm sorry. Or, don't return my calls or say I'm not available. That's not okay. That is an issue. They need to have completed not only the post-certification training. The chief of police needs to complete the California post-certification training. Because California is different. Do you agree? We need someone who is truly here to protect and to serve our communities. Not an elected official. Somebody turn to your right, everybody turn to your right and tell the person next to you, we do not want an elected official. Data-driven. They need to understand the data, the reports that they're receiving. Need to be able to read them. If not, get somebody to read it to them. But they need to take the appropriate action that is required to make things right. Maybe discipline or change within the system. Past force, employment history. Why are they coming here? Are they under investigation in San Francisco? Are you just pushing them and hiding that? Those kind of things are happening, and we want to make sure they don't, that we uncover everything possible, because I know if I apply, they're going to do that to me. Thank you.
Your comments have been thoughtful and straight, and I thank you for taking the time today to engage with your fellow citizens and share your thoughts. There are a couple ways that you can continue having input, and then we'll move to closing comments. On the input page, there is a question 3. If there's anything else that you felt like you wanted to make sure the city should hear, should know, should be aware of, should pay attention to, please answer that in the question number 3. If some of your thoughts didn't get up on these pages, those input forms, we're going to collect them, and those will be typed up as well. You have been Community Forum number 1, set the standard. Now we'll see if we can have this same level of thoughtfulness and considered input as we go forward. I want to turn the microphone back over to Scott Chadwick, our Chief Operating Officer, as he closes out this afternoon's meeting.
Thanks, Danelle. First, can we just give Danelle a round of applause for running this? Because now, it's not part of this, but this is the first time that we've tried this. So I'd really like to know, what did you think? I mean, do you think that this was helpful? Do you think it was? What can we improve on? So, fantastic question. So the feedback loop for this is we've been taping all of this. We've also been Facebook Living this. So we've been putting it and we've been tweeting it live as well to try and reach a broader audience. But what we're going to be doing is taking all that information, we're going to synthesize it into a report, and this will ultimately become attachments in the report, because one of the things that were in that report then will go to City Council, and then we'll also put it on the city's website. insight because we want everyone to know what's been discussed today. My hope is the next forum that we end up having will have an even bigger turnout, but again, we're really excited about so far what we've seen today. Let me go right here and then yes?
One of those same lines, if you could also scan the documents that were participant input and just give the public a complete dump of all 100 pages, that would help us understand, or help people see that what they care about is being addressed, and if not, they can show.
Great suggestion. Good. Others? I saw, yes, ma'am.
I think the board who is choosing the chief should come down for us.
Okay. Okay. Others suggest, yes, sir.
I've just been texting community members that are not here, and what they're sharing with me around here is they have zero trust in this. They don't believe that this is going to be used. And I was wondering, I understand what you're saying about a report in the city council, but how do we really know that the actual committee that will be hiring the police chief, that this will have any bearing on their decision, especially if there's not going to be community members on that hiring committee?
Well, and something that I do want to make very clear, no one said that there aren't going to be community members on the selection panel. So and I need to make that very abundantly clear, no one has said that. What we've said is we don't want to basically broadcast who the members are going to be that are on the selection panel. And the reason that we're doing that, or at least that we've talked about doing that, is for fear of people start turning it into almost like a, instead of focusing their attention on the actual candidates themselves, it turns into focusing the attention on the individuals that are part of the selection panel. So that said, we're in the process right now of hiring our consultant. We went through an RFP process, a competitive process. We have completed that. We have selected an individual, or at least a firm. That said, there is a 10-day cooling off period, or at least an appeal process that can occur within those 10 days. And once we should end up having the consultant on board probably I think it's the end of this month. So by the end of next week, they should be on, so long as there's no appeal. And then we're going to solicit input from them to ask specifically, what's the best way, what's the best path forward for our selection panel? Because again, someone who's participated in actually the hiring of multiple police chiefs, we want to pull on their information or their knowledge base as well. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Scott, I think it may be a little unclear to the people that what exactly you're talking about. At this point, the city is saying that it is going to keep secret who the individuals are on the search committee for the police chief. You are not going to let people know who those are. You like to say the word confidential. Yeah. I like to say the word secret. It means the same thing. That information is going to be withheld from the public at large. There will be people in the city who know. There will be other people who will know and therefore could easily influence those people. But the public is going to be left out of knowing that information at this point. And we would ask that you reconsider that.
I completely understand your position. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Scott. Really quickly, despite everything that was said here today, the ultimate selecting official is the mayor himself.
Correct.
So the mayor himself needs to see all of these talking points. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can promise you that he will. The whole reason why whoever the police chief is, like right now, Shelley Zimmerman, she reports to me. Now, and who do I report to? I report to the mayor. So know that I'm going to be attending each and every one of these. This is invaluable, an invaluable experience for me. I think an invaluable experience for the city because, again, we want to hear what the community thinks. We want to know what the community thinks about what are the characteristics? What are the big things that are going to be facing that police chief over the coming years? Let's face it, recruitment and retention is an issue. Diversity is an issue. These are issues that, again, based off of your input, based off of the information that you provided us, that's going to be encapsulated into ultimately who the next police chief is going to be. So, Okay, last question.
No, actually, it's a comment and a suggestion, respectfully submitted. This good conversation was framed within the context of community conversations, and really that implies a two-way sharing, and maybe start it here because questions were brought to you and comments were brought to you, but in future forums and opportunities, be prepared to share also. And be prepared, and you got a pretty good sampling as to what community stakeholders who are very, very much invested in this process are going to be looking for. Yeah. And again, conversations implied sharing all the way around. Thank you.
Great, good. Anything else? Oh, sorry. My facilitator is, yes, sorry. Yeah. Hold on. No, I can't, you know, I convinced her out of retirement to do this for me, so I'm going to respect my facilitator. So again, I just want to sincerely thank each and every one of you for your time. Your time's valuable, but so is this process. And absent your participation, this wouldn't be a good process. So again, thank you so much. The forms are, if you could, leave them on the table, and the forms will be collected. And again, I just want to sincerely thank you very much. The next forum that we've got is at, hold on. It is at the Mira Mesa Senior Center on Tuesday, September 26th at 6 p.m. Hopefully we'll see many of you there. Take care. Thank you.